Hello and welcome to the Doctor's Corner. I'm your host as always, Dr. Mark Pinsky, and today, part 2 of our series with Father Blake Britton. Today we're going to talk about the spiritual wounds that people may have and how they may heal those spiritual wounds. And Father, it's always a pleasure to have you. I told you, you're our number one guest. Let's keep this trend going here, okay?
It sounds good to me. I always enjoy being on your show. You're a fantastic host and just becoming a good friend as well.
Absolutely. That's an honor for me. I'm not so sure for you, Father, but for me, that's an honor.
Well, everyone has to have their cross to bear, Doc, So we say at the seminary, that people don't bother you. They sanctify you,
I like that little twist.
So you're sanctifying me,
You feel better about yourself?
I know, right? Okay. That's how I sleep at night.
Let's talk about let's talk about spiritual healing for people who have all these internal wounds from other pasts.
Absolutely. So this is sort of one of my many side ministries, and it's become an unexpected source of grace for me in healing spiritual woundedness. So for our listeners and viewers who may not be familiar with it, in all of our lives, we experience something called wounds. These are events from our childhood, adolescence, or young adulthood, things that either we've done that we're particularly shameful of or feel guilty about, or things that others have done to us. Right. And around those wounds, immediately, we will construct, Satan as well will come in there, and start constructing an infrastructure of lies that come out of the wound. I'll give an example of what I mean by that. So let's say, I'll give a personal example. I had a huge crush on this girl when I was growing up. Okay, I'm not going to say her name because
that's simple. We can't talk about it.
Yeah, we can't talk about that. Huge crush on this girl. And I remember I really wanted her to be my girlfriend. We were in the second grade, so very serious relationship. And there was another boy who had a crush on her as well. His name was Preston. I will say his name, Preston. So even his name, he sounds like a bad person, right? Yeah. But we shouldn't be judgmental at all. So she made Preston and I race around the playground to win her hand. It was a very vindictive little girl. And I was a chubby kid.
So you didn't win?
I didn't win. So I wasn't her boyfriend. Now, fast forward. That may not seem like a big deal. And that's how wounds sometimes happen. They don't seem like big deals in the moment. There are such thing as serious wounds, such as sexual abuse, maybe substance abuse, maybe having a father who verbally abused us or a mother that emotionally abused us. So those are serious wounds. But for a lot of us, there's also subtle ones like this event. So now let's fast forward to right before I was ordained a priest. I'm getting ready to be ordained a priest, and this thought keeps coming up on, I just don't know if I'm good enough to be a priest. I just don't know if I'm man enough to be a priest. Am I really the man that the church deserves and that the people of God deserve? And I was sort of taken aback by this struggle. Why am all of a sudden I'm having these sort of thoughts? Well, with my spiritual director, which sort of works as a counselor in the spiritual world, we went back and discovered it was from that experience. So the wound was losing that race, which is embarrassing for a second grader in front of all of his friends. Sure. The lie that surrounded that was, I'm not good enough. Right. And that became now an attitude, a habit, a way of interpreting reality and interpreting myself that's very dangerous. So this manifests itself in our adult lives in multiple forms. Another example that we may have is, let's say that a woman wears a dress, right? And one of her girlfriends comes up and says, that dress really doesn't look good at you. And she says, what, you saying that I'm ugly? Well,
I've never heard that before.
I know, right? There was sort of a reaction that was an overreaction, because most likely there's something underneath that in which she believes a lie or she's insecure in her own image. Yeah. So then we have to go back to her and say, where did that insecurity in your image come from? Maybe when she was a little girl, her dad told her one time that she was ugly. Right. Or maybe she wore a dress, to see her boyfriend, and her boyfriend broke up with her. You never know. So what I do with these persons that I work with, and what we're called to in our own lives, is first of all, identify what these wounds are. All of us have them, and there's nothing wrong with that. To identify the lies that surround them, and then to identify the attitudes or habits that we formed out of them, and what can we do to healthily dismantle that infrastructure of lies and to rebuild an infrastructure of truth that's based on our inherent human dignity.
Love it. Yeah. So let me ask you this, because I've never even asked my rabbi this question. I think it's a great question. I got to tell you that before I ask it. No, I didn't even ask my rabbi this question, but I imagine you do this going through your ministry. Mm-hmm. Do you work with healthcare professionals that are either psychologists, psychiatrists, licensed clinical social workers, who may work side by side with you to sort of help in this venue, because it's got to be very difficult sometimes to get really down to the root of the problem.
Very much so. And this is one of the great graces, specifically in Catholicism, is that we're very emphatic on the sciences. We have a very scientific tradition. The inventor of the Big Bang Theory, for heaven's sake, was a Catholic priest. And so co-oping with the scientific community, specifically in the medical and psychological field, is essential. There are cases in which we will refer to a counselor, but we also need to couple that with the spiritual realm. There are 3 parts to the human person. You have the pneumatic, which comes from the Greek word pneuma, and that means spirit, so the pneumatic. You have the psychic, so the psychological part of the person, and then you have the somatic, which is your field of expertise, so you have the biological person. In order for us to be a healthy individual, all 3 of these parts of our being need to be in perfect sync. And if they're not, you will see ramifications. If your pneumatic person or your psychic person is out of sorts, you will have biological manifestations. For sure. And you'll see this through depression, anxiety. You'll see this through people may have the shakes, or maybe there's fluctuation even in weight and things like that. Usually that's tied to something much deeper. And so we do co-op on a regular basis with the psychological and with the medical community. And the other field that we have to do this is in the field of exorcism. Really? So before we actually bring someone in to officially go to a designated exorcist, which each diocese has its own exorcist, that is not allowed to be, said publicly, so the person's identity is secret. But they're officially dispensed by the bishop, and they have special faculties that no other priest in the diocese has. In order for someone to go to an exorcist, they first must go through a medical and psychological evaluation to make sure that it really is a demon that's at work, as opposed to just maybe bipolar or schizophrenia or something along those lines.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah. Isn't that cool?
And it's cool. I'm embarrassed to tell you, I was a religion minor. I didn't even know that. That's really a cool thing. So that really takes it to a whole other level. Is that well known in the church? I mean, do members of the church know this?
So it's not well known among the laity. In other words, those who are not ordained, and that's unfortunate, because it should be well known. Yeah. And I've found that as I've preached more and more about this notion of spiritual healing, this notion that each of us has wounds and that we really need to actively work on healing these wounds. A lot of us, the reason why we go throughout our lives with different kinds of struggles, emotionally, psychologically, and even spiritually, is because of these unaddressed wounds that we haven't gone through with a minister or with a proper counselor.
100%.
And I do speak about this on a regular basis, specifically with my parishioners and also through my podcast. And it's amazing to see our podcast goes international. So I'm getting emails from people in France, from Germany, the Philippines. And they're saying, Father, we've never heard this before. Like, we never heard this notion of healing the whole person. But this is really essential for humanity and for us to live the fullest life.
So taking it back to you, I guess you really have fulfilled. You are worthy, sir, of becoming a priest.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're terrific. I mean, you're pretty amazing.
Please stop.
No, you are pretty amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
And the parish here is very blessed to have you, Father.
Thank you
I
very
do
much.
mean that. I do mean that. Jeremy and I talk about it all the time. I really think you're a very special human.
Thank
and
you.
you've only just begun. That's the best part of it. We're trying to get into your good graces because we totally intend for someday to either be a cardinal or bishop.
Oh,
or
my
like that. We fully intend that to happen, sir. So
well, God's will be done.
So we're trying to get into your good graces. No, we just think you're just an amazing asset we're blessed to have you in the community. I think you're a wonderful asset to the community.
Thank you.
But I think one of the things that I've learned even through my own time, which I did not know from your perspective, is how integral we really need to be.
Yeah.
With whatever the person's faith is, right? So getting people to believe. I want people to believe, right?
Yes.
It makes them better people to believe.
Yes.
I always tell them, find your spirit. If you don't find it, you're going to wander.
Yep.
So you need to find the spirit that's within you, and then you'll be a whole better human.
Absolutely.
No doubt. So I try to point them in certain directions.
And that's absolutely necessary. I think that the millennial and the Gen Z generation is starting to realize the fallout of atheism. That atheism is inadequate to humanity. It doesn't address the questions properly. And that's why you're finding less and less atheists and more agnostics. Yeah. These persons who are willing to admit, actually, I tried the whole atheism thing and, it doesn't work. Like, there are parts of my humanity that are not being fulfilled by just the purely empirical sciences. Right. There must be more to human existence in this, which we call the transcendental. Right. And it's very important. My brother is becoming a medical doctor, and he's getting ready to enter into residency right now. He actually just got married recently, too. So he's got a new sister in the family. Yeah. And so a little little shout out to Alexander and Colleen Britton. But it's been amazing as him and I dialogue in his expertise in medicine, my expertise in the spiritual life and counseling. It's been interesting because he's also admitted that even in the medical field, they're starting to recognize more and more that some doctors have not been appropriately trained to minister, and that's the kind of language they're using in medical school now, minister kind of language, to minister to the whole human person.
Right.
So they'll diagnose sort of the somatic or superficial problems, and they'll give maybe medication or what have you, but they're not actually addressing the whole lifestyle of the person. 100%. And that's very important. What would you say about that? Because I know that's one of your main focuses.
It is a huge focus for me. As a DO, as an osteopath, working with the whole person, we know that all the systems are interrelated, so why wouldn't the spirit be all interrelated?
Right.
And I will say to you, I did an MD residency. I got a chance to see the other side of the world, and I was blessed because in Louisville, Kentucky, where I did my residency, one of the physicians was also a minister. So one of his regular teachings during clinic was, have you spoken to the patient? Have you spoken to the patient about their life? And have you spoken to the patient about where they're at and their issues, their problems, concerns? And so, of course, the other students weren't trained that way, but I was trained that way. Wow. So for me, but this goes back to 1990, 91, 92, 94, where that was... Even, Father, I'm telling you, in Louisville, Kentucky, the middle of the Bible Belt, that was really taboo.
Wow.
I mean, doctors were not supposed to do that. But I did it all the time.
That's awesome.
I challenge the system all the time.
From the beginning.
From the very beginning. I said, this doesn't make any sense. You cannot take care of people physically, and as you say, take care of those somatic complaints, but not address the emotional and mental issues that go along with it. And I think we try to do that and separate it out. But I agree with you. Even today, even as far as we've come, we're not nearly there, Father.
We're not. And this is until we start recognizing the reality of the spiritual realm and the reality of the psychological realm and its interconnectivity with the somatic realm, we're going to continue having the many issues that we do now. And that has been one of the major lacunas or spaces, if you will, in our healthcare system as of late, that there has not been a co-op between religious professionals, medical professionals, and psychological professionals. In the Catholic Church, we have several associations, for example, the Catholic Medical Association, and its whole goal is to unite doctors with the local parish priest.
I think that's terrific.
Because there are times when the doctor will recognize, I've reached the extent of what my profession can aid you with. Now it's time for you to go be revitalized in your faith. Yeah. Your issue here is not in the mind, and it's not in the body, it's in the heart. You have a broken heart, and we even have people who die from broken hearts.
For sure.
We know about. That's
I see it all the time. It's a real thing. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
And a matter of fact, when you see a patient, they always know when they're going to die. So if I see a patient in the hospital, a patient will often say to me, Doctor, am I going to die? And my answer has always been steadily, you tell me.
Wow.
Because Father, I'm telling you, they always know, and I'm sure when you counsel with people, will feel the very similar thing.
Oh yeah.
I will say this: I think getting the two communities more involved quicker.
Yes.
Right. What happens is we run through this course, right? So we run through this course. Oh, let's deal with this. Maybe throw a couple of pills at you. Do this. But we don't do it quick enough. So, for example, maybe within the first few times that I see somebody, I know emotionally they're not quite right. I will bring up what their spirituality is. I will bring up what their affiliations are. I will ask them these questions. Matter of fact, it's a part of our form when we fill out, not because I want to know whether they're Catholic or Jewish,
right.
but because I want to know what their spirit is. I want to know, if they have one.
Absolutely.
So if there's an issue, I can always just say to them, hey, have you spoken to?
Right.
And I try to get the psychological people involved very quickly. I'm not a big fan of psychiatrists, if you'll forgive me for that. They've already forgiven me for that.
Right.
And the reason I'm not a big fan is because it's not the same as it was before. We've had some wonderful psychiatrists in this community who, unfortunately, the psychiatric world is not able to really do what they're supposed to do.
Right.
And the old psychiatrists were big into behavior modification and really dealing with the whole psyche. Now it's, a 5-10 minute visit. Let's give you some pills. Have a nice day. Modify the pills. So I try to send all of my people to psychologists or licensed clinical social workers, and I try to match up the person with personality.
Yes.
Right? So sometimes women like women, sometimes men prefer women, sometimes, right? You have to know. Sometimes they like older, sometimes they like younger. Yeah. And there really is a science and an art to that. And I think it's super important.
Yeah, the human condition can't be fixed by a pill.
No.
You know, it really can't. And let me tell you what happens when the pills stop working. That's when they call me.
That's exactly what happens.
It's crazy because I'll be there in my confessional or I'll be there in my office, and this is where they come when the pills have fallen short. And it's amazing the amount of people who have come to me, and I'll have a few sessions with them in spiritual direction or in pastoral counseling, or all that they need really is a good confession. They'll come up and say, Father,
purge.
Exactly. They're like, Father, for some reason I've been having these issues. I'm like, when was your last confession? 35 years ago. Well, I think I found the problem, right? And so there it is, boop, and you sort of touch that wound and everything comes out, right? And they're like, Father, I feel better than I've ever felt before. My back isn't hurting anymore. I'm not walking hunched over anymore. Again, your pneumatic and psychic person affects your somatic person. And you can even have physical manifestations if that's not properly done. So you're right. I mean, it is not sufficient to deal in the world of psychiatry and psychology with that manner. And we do need to increase the co-op there.
No, as a matter of fact, the studies have remained the same since the 1970s. If you go look at them, I was a national speaker for 5 different antidepressants. Right? I did it. Why? Because it allowed me to understand the medications more, to be a better doctor, really, for the patients. It was very fascinating, the questions that I would get by other doctors. But one of the things I learned from all those studies is that at best, medicine alone was only 59% effective. All the studies are the same. Yet you add counseling to it, it becomes 74%. You know what they never did, Father?
What?
They never took it a step further and said, what if you did pastoral counseling? What if you did spiritual counseling? What if we added this onto it? How much better would it be? Maybe it'd be 85%, right? Yeah. So I think that there's a large realm for this world that you and I are talking about now. And it needs to be promoted. I know you have a big interest of doing this with your brother.
I do.
I'm telling you, you're going to touch so many people, Father. It's going to be a wonderful thing. And I'm actually talking about this with several people of my faith. I think it's a necessary part of what should be done.
Absolutely.
I think Judaism has not done a very good job, in my opinion. I'll probably get a lot of hate mail for that, but I really do believe it's true, and I think we could do better.
Yeah.
So the whole notion of that is, don't get mad at me. Let's make it better.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me throw my hat in the ring. Catholicism also hasn't done the best job at that, so let's just both get yelled at. I mean, might as well suffer together, right?
Yeah, sure.
But Yom Kippur here.
That's what friends are for. That's right. That's right.
But that being said, you're right. Just across the boundary, and there's been fault on both sides.
For sure.
So especially in the United States, it's now we're going more into the realm of political philosophy, which I'm a philosopher, so this is one of my main areas of expertise. But in the United States, because we have the separation between church and state, there's sometimes a temptation to isolate these two areas. And we also tend to make religion something that's absolutely subjective and doesn't tie into the rest of our reality. And that cannot be the case. Religion inherently exists to imbue all of reality. And it's actually better for society when it does.
Oh, for sure.
When you look at the height of different civilizations, religion was always at the center of it. You look at the Romans, you look at the Greeks, and then going on to the post-Christian Roman Empire. You look, of course, at the Jewish and the Middle Eastern empires. I mean, the religions are at their best when religion is at its core. Not whenever the state's at its core. The state at the end is a vehicle to serve the masses, but it is not the reason why the masses are there. And so I think recapturing that notion is going to be important for us. And it's just sort of a retraining in our minds as Americans because we have this kind of distinction. So what can we do to cross those boundaries?
And I totally agree. Let's bring it home. Let's bring the message home. If you had to give a message to your people out there, my people out there, people of all humanity, how would you say that they should go about starting the wound healing process?
So step one would be, very simply, get a piece of paper, make 3 columns. On the left, put wounds, and the next in the middle, put lies, and on the very end, put inner vows or habits. And this comes from a doctor named Dr. Bob Schutz, a wonderful, wonderful guy who does a lot with this sort of spiritual counseling. And then I've modified a few things with it through my own pastoral experience. In those 3 columns, write down what your wounds are. Typically, there are 3 or 4, major wounds that each of us has in our lives. Around those wounds, what are the lies that have come out of that? So again, usually there are 2 to 3 major lies that feed our lies. I'm not good enough. I'm a failure. I'm ugly. I'm dumb. I'm stupid. Whatever the lie is that we believe about ourselves. And then what are the habits? What are the attitudes? What are the reactions that we've developed from years of being reiterated by that lie? So step 1 is just identifying them. Step 2 would then be bringing them into the spiritual realm through prayer. And if you have a religious person who you can go to, whether that be your rabbi, your priest, your minister, to go to that person and maybe begin a dialogue saying, I would like to have prayer and I would like to ask the Lord to help me start reclaiming and reintegrating my whole person. And then you could also tie that over to having some lifestyle changes. Right. Changing the infrastructure of how you live your daily life, changing some of your habits and attitudes. I promise you that if you follow this program, it will liberate your soul in such amazing ways. I have seen nothing but, this is going to be a bold claim, 100% success rate. Okay, not 95, not 85.
Pressure.
100% success rate. But really, I have not seen anyone use this that hasn't benefited in some way.
Well, listen, that just makes total sense. It makes total common sense that if we then bring this very important aspect of life into our life, that our life will be better.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't take, a super intelligent human to figure that part out. I think people are lost. So let's try to bring them back to the spiritual world, whatever that would mean to you. Bring you back to the spiritual world. I think it will really help you become better people and endure and thrive.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I can't thank you enough.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure being with you. And God bless you and the whole audience.
I love it. Thank you so much. Now, don't forget, he's going to come back for part 3. So for Father Blake Britton, I am Dr. Mark Pinsky. You've been watching The Doctor's Corner. This is Dr. Mark Pinsky once again, asking you to forward questions to us, whether regarding this episode or any of our past episodes, at drmarkscorner@gmail.com. Also, don't forget to check us out on our website, pinskywellness.com or pinskyweightloss.com. We look forward to hearing all of your questions, and we'll get back to you as soon as we do. Y'all have a great week.